An odd thing can happen when you work your butt off becoming amazing at something and people start to praise you for your skills. It can become terrifying to start something new at ground zero, as an amateur, as a beginner. The fear of looking dumb or silly trying something new can hold you back, despite the fact that pushing through that fear and letting yourself look a little silly at first could potentially take your life to a whole new level. This exact fear was holding back a nationally renowned American Vigilance League fighter by the name of Chadwick Gigar. He was the face of brute force fighting. In a world where 22.2% of people get superpowers at some point in their life, super strength was not rare, but Chadwick had worked his out in all the right ways to become a powerhouse fighter. He technically didn't have S-ranked super strength, the highest tier there is, but as someone born with A rank, he'd then trained so hard that he'd pushed himself over into the next tier. He also had an aura ability, which added to the power of his hits. When he was taking a very deliberate swing, 2 extra semi-translucent fists would appear around his own. He'd hit the person and it was like all time would briefly freeze, with the other 2 fists in delay by a fraction of a second each. The impact of the first punch would be quickly followed up by blows from the second and third aura fists. And then the opponent or environment struck would be affected by the tripled up superpowered punch all at once. For the last 5 years, Chadwick had been slowly rising up the ranks of the American Vigilance League, after having started in the British League before moving to America on an increased pay offer and new sponsorships. His own people had been angry about the move, but he'd set them at ease enough by saying,
"Apologies to all Britannia, but I gotta go show them Yankees what a real vigilant can do."
He started off by putting on quite the show for people in America, but by now everyone had assumed the burly brawler would have finally gotten to the top 5 of the American League to break through into the Global League. Instead, he eventually hit a wall after losing to who was now the global champ, Freya Sparks. Prior to reaching the Global League herself, Sparks had already become famous for her bland fighting style of slowing her opponent's movements with an electric resistance field around her, then waiting until they'd worn themselves out enough for her to finish them off. Chadwick hadn't been too concerned about going up against her, and even bragged to the world,
"That Sparks kid is good alright, but only way she's getting to the Global League is if I'm in one of the slots above her."
Unfortunately for his ego, it wouldn't shake out that way. Chadwick was known to have lower than average endurance because he could usually beat an opponent before getting too worn out, so if a fight went on long enough, he could quickly lose his edge. In his fight with Freya, he thought he could counter this by triple aura punching the ground near her field to hit her with shockwaves and throw her off enough to get in and land a punch, but she proved to be far too evasive. Even without him getting into her resistance field and being slowed, she was way too fast and agile for him. Eventually, he even went right into her field out of frustration to try and hit her anyway, but slowed to a 20th his usual speed by her, she dodged around everything and just started laying hits on him while he was trying to reel back his fists for another failed swing. By the time Freya switched over to attack, Chadwick was so winded that he'd practically finished himself off. The fight went to Freya, and Chadwick lost his shot that year at the Global League. What was worse, though, is after that, many other fighters with agility and speed skills started using that same tactic on Chadwick. They'd seen how tired he got after being danced around for a while, and soon he was losing fight after fight after fight and slipping farther and farther down the ranks. After a while, people started asking if he was going to change up his tactics, but he just asserted,
"Please, I'll do what I always done, get stronger and be icing mugs in no time. You all just watch."
But as he said it, he knew he wasn't even convincing himself. Eventually, he went in the dead of night to a Vigilance agility gym, full of running tracks, trampolines, bars, and spring floors. He started by running the tracks, seeing how fast he could go and for how long, which was barely faster than an E-rank runner. Plus, after 15 minutes of that and some time on the trampolines, he was already sweating buckets. He was going to push himself to keep going, but then some people showed up and he immediately grabbed his things to leave, not wanting anyone to see how poorly his agility training was going. Worse still, he saw that one of the people who'd shown up was Flamtatius Staphos, an eccentric and outgoing fighter known for his incredible agility. Well, I never thought I'd see the Gigachad train here at an agility gym. Didn't think flips and kicks were your shtick, bucko. Want me to show you some moves before our big match? Chadwick just grunted and left. They both shared an agent, in fact the same one as Freya Sparks, and through that agent both got invites to the British League Invitationals. Flamtatious and Chadwick had never actually fought before, but if they did go up against each other in that tournament, Chadwick was worried with Flamtatious's speed and agility, the outcome was already decided. Plus the idea of someone like Staphos seeing him flopping and sweating around on the bars and tracks was too embarrassing for Chadwick to even consider. He went back to just trying to amp up his strength even more, and talked to some of his brawny gym buddies about how frustrating it was that so many people were starting to beat him because of his lack of agility. One of his most mountainous jacked friends said,
"Look bro, it's like Eckhart Tolle says, whatever the present moment contains, you gotta accept it as if you had chosen it. Maybe you needed this challenge to make you try something new, bro. We know you'll figure it out, man, we love you."
It wasn't exactly what Chadwick had wanted to hear, but with the British Invitationals 3 months away, he really didn't want to show up just to get thumped by speedy fighters again. A week later, he showed up once more at a super early hour to the agility gym, but as he went in, he saw that Flamtatious was already there. Flam had the ability to manifest bars in the air around him, either to pluck out of the air and use as weapons, or to have them stuck in the air, then use them to hurl himself around. He also had B-rank agility and C-rank speed, but had power suppressors on while training, still able to flip and spin on the gym bars like the laws of physics didn't apply to him. Chadwick wanted to just turn back, but withheld the urge and still entered the gym. Flam noticed him and flipped through the bars to land down near him. "Back again, big boy. Change your mind about learning some moves from the flippy Flamtatious himself, As he said it, he patted Chadwick's arm, then looked shocked and squeezed his bicep. "My God, it's like you're a bag of boulders in a flesh suit."
Was you serious about being willing to teach me some stuff, Flam?"
Flam's eyes shot open and he clapped both his hands around the burly fighter's face. "By the time I'm done with you, you'll be like if a rhinoceros and a spider monkey had a human growth hormone-infused baby."
I got zero idea what that means, but it sounds like a yes.
Flam stepped back. "Meet me here at 5 p.m. tomorrow. I still need my training time before I take on a pet project."
No dice, I ain't training here when other folks is around."
Flam leapt up onto the bars and started flinging himself about while he said, "Then I guess you're not training with me. 5 p.m., don't be late." Chadwick left in a huff, unsure if he was even going to come back. It was bad enough that the flailing goofball was going to see him embarrassing himself, but that gym at 5 p.m. would be packed with people who knew exactly who he was and what his reputation was. He spent the rest of that day feeling as embarrassed as if he was already flop sweating in front of all of them. Still, he showed up, and just as expected, plenty of people were looking at him as he came in. He tried to hold his head high as he went over to Flamtatious, who was wearing a garish Technicolor gymnast one-piece. "There he is, my hulked-up duckling. Let's make you into a beautiful flipping swan. Come, come." As if he wasn't getting enough attention for being Chadwick Gigar at an agility gym, he forgot that his instructor was the most attention-seeking fighter in the league. Still, Chadwick followed along as Flam took him through stretches, and already Gigar was getting embarrassed. He was not very flexible at all. There was one guy in the gym, a lower-tier vigilance fighter named Brass Barrock, who he could have sworn was giving him dirty, judgmental looks the whole time he was there. Gigar did his best to ignore this, but that entire first day he felt like he was being stared at and judged from everyone around him. Chadwick's goal was both to increase his endurance, but also to start learning some of the agility-based moves people had been using on him. Eventually, they got onto the trampolines, and Flam got a power suppressor on Chadwick, then had him do some basic seat drops to get started, and even those felt super awkward. Chadwick pushed for Flam to get to some flips or anything that might look at least a little bit cool to pull off. Flam tried to get him to crouch down and roll on the trampoline to get started, but Chadwick didn't want to look like a baby. There were literally 7-year-olds in a kids program there landing flips. He should be able to do one too. Without instruction, he just tried to full send a front flip and ended up flinging off the trampoline and landing on his back next to it with a thud that shook the mats around him. "Well, that was super fun, and if you want to keep looking like a bowling ball in a bounce house, then I can just go. Or you can do what I say and we can actually get somewhere." Chadwick groaned through the coaching, but did as Flam said, doing all the build-up exercises until he finally started going for the flip. He missed the first few landing on his back, then his butt, but eventually did start landing them. He then tried them without a power suppressor on, and thanks to the super strength in his legs, he could fling himself much higher and was going for double flips by the end of that day's training. He was feeling pretty good, but then tried one backflip and felt like a flailing toddler all over again. Still, he kept on showing up. 3 times a week, Flamtatious was willing to train him, so long as they did some cross-promotion posting on social media, showing them hanging out together. At first, Chadwick avoided any mention of what they were actually doing, until into his 3rd week. He'd kept seeing that brass Barrock guy around the gym staring at him and never figured out why, until he was leaving the gym one day and the Vigilant approached him. Brass told him, "Hey man, I've never been a fan of your cocky, I'm the best tough guy attitude, but I gotta say it's pretty inspiring seeing you training at something that obviously doesn't come naturally to you at all. Got me thinking about trying some new stuff too, so thanks. I'll be rooting for you at the British Invitational." That moment shook away tons of Chadwick's fears of people seeing him fail. He'd never thought about what he was doing as possibly inspiring anyone. After that, he started being more open about his posts with Flam. He really loosened up and even started posting the funniest fails from the things he was trying. From there, both of their social media followings started exploding with popularity, and their agent said that tons more invites were coming in for both of them to attend other tournaments that had never looked their way before. Some were even trying to get them to come and do doubles fights, though that circuit was still pushing through its past controversies to become a more respected part of the Vigilance community. Chadwick had even started having fun with his training, though more so after he started seeing significant results. When he wasn't wearing the power suppressor, he could maneuver his body now with far more accuracy than ever before. Instead of just going into a brawl all top-heavy ready to hit, he could now dodge by leaping backwards into a handspring, getting back to his feet, then launching forward into a counter-strike. He'd still stumble a fair amount, but for just 3 months of training with Flam and some on his own, he made an incredible amount of progress. And then the day came for them to both travel to the British Invitational. At that point, there was a ton of buzz around them, and it seemed like Chadwick had become the biggest story to watch at the tournament. Before going into his match, he was hanging with Flamtatious and said,
"Here goes nothing. Thanks again, Flam. You're a lot less annoying than I thought you was, bruv."
Flam slapped his hands onto either side of Chadwick's cheeks again and said, "You're stupendously welcome. Now go get them, my beautiful jacked up monkey rhino."
Still makes not a lick of sense, but alright.
He set off into the arena to a massive swell of cheers. The tournament orchestrators must have known what they were doing in putting him first up against an Australian champ named Wallop Beaton. He was known for his incredible agility and did almost all his fighting with his legs and the muscular tail that emerged from his lower back. As soon as the fight began, Wallop started bounding around the arena as if trying to goad Chadwick into chasing him down. But Gigar wasn't going to fall for that and wear himself out. He waited for his opponent to come to him. Wallop built up some speed, then launched himself feet first at Chadwick. Gigar readied up his arms as if he was going to block it, but then sprung up into the air, flipping over Wallop and smashing his fist down into his foe's stomach. Chadwick sloppily landed the flip, but Wallop slammed into the ground and rolled across the arena. Chadwick ran at him while he was down and grabbed his tail. Wallop used that grip though to pull himself in and double kick Chadwick in the chest. He flew backwards but tucked into a backflip, then landed on his hands and flung himself over into a graceful landing on his feet. The crowd exploded in cheers. He hadn't come close to winning yet, but landing that move and hearing people's applause felt more satisfying than any win in recent memory. The fight went on, and not all his acrobatics were so graceful. He even landed on his head in one particularly bad dodge attempt, but he kept going and noticed that while he was getting winded, his opponent was too. Eventually, Wallop had gotten behind Chadwick while he was getting himself up and went for a full force kick to the back of Gigar's head. But Chadwick decided it was time to work in a bit of his old self to complement the new. He did a backwards dive and rolled under Wallop, then caught his tail and yanked him back in. He then hammered him with a triple aura punch, and when that third impact hit, Wallop exploded into the wall of the arena and was out cold. The crowd erupted into cheers again. Gigar had finally learned how to take down agility-based fighters, and all it had taken was being willing to be a beginner at something long enough to eventually get good at it. Of course, that wasn't the end of his journey in becoming more agile. In fact, he didn't even make it into the finals of the British Invitational. He lost in the semifinals to his own trainer Flamtatious, who obviously knew all of Gigar's agility tricks, having taught them to him. But Chadwick didn't take it personally and even learned things from Flam in that fight, and they'd continue training together after that, staying good friends. Gigar wasn't disheartened at all by not winning the British Invitational because he'd seen that if he could improve that much in just 3 months, then after 6 months or a year, he was practically guaranteed to finally make it into the Global Vigilants League and try his hand again at taking down Freya Sparks. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Vigilance, which was actually inspired by my own personal journey recently to switch over from weightlifting to doing calisthenics and gymnastics and trampolining and stuff like that, where I very much felt like a beginner. But seeing my progress through this has been incredibly satisfying, and it's now my new favorite hobby. If you want more episodes like this, I actually have a story about Freya Sparks, the Global Vigilance champion who beat Chadwick Gigar in this story. I'll link her episode and another one from Season 1 of Vigilance. I think you'll enjoy those too.